Hi everyone, I have just finished Someone to Honor by Mary Balogh. As the Westcott series progresses, the stories become that much richer and the characters gain depth. This story is moving along quite rapidly and 6 years have come and gone between the first book and this one. It was an interesting story with several of the same concepts that many of you may have noticed from the rest of the novels: honor, truth, love, and so on. However, on this one there was a very interesting theme that I wanted to explore, as it left me with a few interesting ideas. This is a story of Abigail Westcott, who became an illegitimate daughter to his father 6 years prior to the beginning of this book. She was ready to make her debut in society, but it all suddenly changed when Anna Snow became the only heir to the name, fortune, and property. She meets and marries Lieutenant Colonel Gilbert Bennington, a friend of Abigail's brother, Harry Westcott. They have an interesting first encounter, one of almost polar opposites. It is depicted by showing his brute masculinity in display, right in front of the prudish tenderness of someone who had grown as a lady, as she runs into him chopping wood, shirtless, with an axe. It's interesting, because all the assumptions that one would expect them to make are made about the other. Him, she's just a self-righteous, prudish lady, I could never like her. And her, he's just a brute and uneducated beast that wouldn't know how to behave properly. Through their interaction, they discover one another. They become people that they ought to honor. This is explored in a very interesting way, in my opinion. At some point, they're engaged in conversation and she explains to him that she didn't want the lady life anymore, that she didn't want to marry for what she was or what had merely happened to her, but for who she was. To this, he asks her who that was, meaning Abigail, and she could not answer. And I think this is the crux of their story. Who you are is several different aspects of your life, not just where you were born, who you were reared by, or what happened to you, or what was done to you, but to a larger degree, what you have done with all of that. Gilbert is a man of war, who had killed many men. His ex-wife lured him into marriage because she sought to exploit this bruteness she perceived him as having. She was seeking thrill, something that ultimately led to her demise, leaving behind their daughter, who was now in the custody of Gilbert's ex-in-laws. Abigail was a lady, for all intents and purposes, and to all outside spectators. But that isn't who she was. She rarely showed her true self to the world. She lived a lot inside her head. In order to establish a believable legal case for Gilbert to get his daughter back, being married was a good idea, and this propels them into marriage. And this is where I thought the story became the most interesting. Being a Westcott novel, one would expect it to be Abigail's story, but it's really Gilbert's. He was so sure of how others perceived him because of his background and upbringing that he would behave in a way that would anticipate rejection and almost disgust from others. And he defends his idea of himself quite clearly too, even to the point of quarreling with Abigail over it, which I hadn't seen in a novel done quite so well. I gotta commend Abigail's patience in that instance and her ability to put herself in his shoes. However, at the legal hearing for the custody of his daughter, the entire Westcott family came forth on his behalf to honor who he actually was, a man who had turned an awful hand into an honorable life, worthy of the respect and care of others. Despite his brutish appearance and his gutter rat childhood, he was a loving, caring, sweet, and honorable individual. This is explained as, despite the difficulties of his life, he never gave up on his dream, a loving family. But I think that can be seen another way, never losing one's north towards an aim. Put yet another way perhaps would be, react to life today as if you were already the person you aim to be. It's the marrying of your nature with your ideal in your present self, your instinct with your imagination, your emotions with your thoughts, your body with your mind, and so on. It's taking a part of you that you cannot change, your past, and connecting it with that part of you that can potentially change, your future, in yourself today. Or at least recognizing that such is your current situation. You're coming from somewhere and you're headed in a direction. The direction you can choose, where your point of origin kind of just happened to you. There was part of the book that was rather stoic in its philosophy. At some point, Gilbert says something like, "Do not borrow trouble from the future, and do not dwell on the one from the past unless you're willing and able to do something about it right now." It speaks of being here today without losing sight of your goals and where you came from. Quite stoic and mindful as it happens. Personally, this whole series has moved me quite a bit. Dealing with broken families and difficult childhoods, it has put a lot into perspective for me. The Westcott series has at times made me feel sad, angry, lonely, and nostalgic, but it has also been inspiring and healing, if that makes sense. Thank you so very much for watching if you've made it this far. If you liked this video, I hope you guys click like, and you can subscribe to my channel if you want to, and share it with your friends. Thank you so very much. I'll see you guys next time.